1, 2, 3, 4.
If you can do all your stuff, what can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
It's so cold that it hurts.
Did
when
you
we
hurt
clap.
yourself? All right, so I just need to describe this visual for the folks at home. I am on FaceTime with Miss Teresa Sparks, and I am seeing she's wearing a parka. She's got some awesome, I think you call them wrist warmers or fingerless gloves, and a hat.
Yeah. And
Now, I know what's going on. I should also mention that it's about 20 degrees outside and it's snowing.
Yeah.
And I think it's supposed to hit -1 tonight.
Yes,
So
I think that's...
tell the folks at home what's happening in your world right now.
So what's happening in my world is that our heater, on the first cold day, which was probably 2.5 weeks ago now, our heater isn't warm anymore. It still blows air, but the air is not warm. And so it is not doing its job as a heater. And we called the landlord, and the earliest appointment a heating system repair guy could make it is tomorrow. And it's so I have a little space heater here. It's an like radiator style hot oil kind of radiant heater that is my best friend and lives right next to me at all times.
Is there a way you can sit on it? You
Yeah.
know, can you convert it into a chair?
Yeah, I'm actually tall enough to straddle it without burning myself on the tallest parts of it, that was a learning curve for sure. I have some really strange burn marks on my upper inner thighs until I learned exactly how to position myself to get the most out of it. But yes, I straddle it and can warm up from the bottom, which is nice. I can also do a partial squat and hover over it, so just the butt part is getting warm and not the inner leg part. And then I cuddle it. So like I sit down in a chair next to it and I just like cross my arms on it. Because I'm wearing so many layers that like my arms don't. My arms are quite warm. So I lean on it like at the desk and put my head down like a kid from the Little Rascals and just let the warm air help my upper part.
Like you're playing Heads Up, 7-Up?
Yes, that's exactly.
Did you ever play that game?
That's exactly what it is. That's perfect, yes.
This is the only time you were allowed to put your fucking head on your desk, man. I wanted to 90% of the time. School just has that effect on me.
Yeah. So, it's, I'm a pioneer this week. I'm a pioneer. It's pretty cold in here.
It appears that the long cabbage winter has, in fact, begun.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain the long cabbage winter inside joke that we have?
At one point, it's probably been 10 years ago now, was just so poor in the winter. I was working for a theater festival.
You were an employee of a theater festival.
Which is probably all that needs to be said. And I was working part-time doing something else, and I lived in a basement, and it was very cold. And I actually had to call my parents for money. And my mother, bless her, actually bought me a gift card to King Soopers, because I was like, I just need groceries. And she's like, well, why don't I just get... And I was like, perfect, that's perfect, thank you. So she did that. And I lived that entire winter on cabbage, because cabbage there's a surprising amount of biomass per the dollar with cabbage.
Right.
So if you need bulk, and if you need something that can take a sauce very well, cabbage is your friend. Cabbage takes a sauce pretty well. It's really nice cooked in a little bacon fat, soften it up. And then
Cabbage episode coming next week. Teresa loves cabbage.
And Teresa loves cabbage. So we had a joke that was the cabbage winter. That was how I saw myself through that winter, was the cabbage winter. And by February, I was very, very tired of cabbage.
But you had this great sort of story you took on, that you were in fact a pioneer, or you having to live by your wits and
dig frozen potatoes out of the soil in my neighborhood. That was also the year that I lived in a development that year that used to be an orchard. and a lot of the fruit trees were in backyards or front yards or whatever. And so that was also the autumn I went around and basically like scavenged people's plums off of their front lawns and brought them home and made jam out of them.
It's cabbage for dinner and plums for dessert, folks, all winter long.
Yeah. So it's not the cabbage winter because I have lots of delicious food in the kitchen, thankfully. But yeah, it's quite cold. I am once again a pioneer, but I'm a pioneer of temperature this year, not of food.
I think that it's a great strategy to get you through, of course, not traumatizing times, but semi-difficult times, is to make up a story that helps you. You know, I used to pretend that I was like a superhero or something. And, you know, Tim and I used to not really drive a car. We'd walk and take the bus. And when it was winter, we would pretend that we were on the Alaska, The Last Frontier show. And because they'd always be so dramatic about the weather, of course, because it's fucking Alaska. Yeah. And so we'd narrate it, you know, will Tim and Claire make it across the parking lot without freezing their fucking feet off? Find out next time on Alaska, The Last Frontier.
Yes. It's like that. Oh man. And the dogs, you know, it's cold when Murphy requests, I call them unders. He doesn't like coming under the covers with me, except in the deepest, darkest winter. And I don't like having him under the covers with me, except in the deepest, darkest winter, because he's quite warm. He's a little heat generator. And so we have a detente where he's like, no, I'm happy sleeping in the room with you, but I'm not a bed dog. And I was like, okay, great, no problem. And then
respect who he is.
Yes, exactly. And then 2 days ago, he was like, grunting at me from the edge of the bed. I was like, yeah, come on, dude. He's like, great. And he jumped up and got under and like curled up as the little spoon, you know? And I was like, I needed this too, bud. Thank you. It's really cold today. He's like, yeah, man, it's really cold today. So
look, the cold weather just brings the introverts together.
It does. We're like, we got to band together for warmth. We're not going to make it. And this is maybe the worst part, is that when it's this cold, I finally understand the band name 3 Dog Night. I finally get it. Like, I viscerally understand. Because a 3 Dog Night is a night that's cold enough that you need 3 dogs around you to keep you warm.
Is that true?
It is true.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's great. What a great band name. I suddenly have new respect for it.
Yeah. It's good. Yes, in that light, it is a very good band name.
Yeah. We should tell everybody that this is It Chooses You, the podcast. I am Claire Patton.
And I am Teresa Sparks. And 73 people have downloaded this. Woohoo! That's amazing. I celebrate those successes. It may not sound like much to you professional podcasters out there, but we've done it only doing as much work as we feel like doing. And that is a huge success.
Yay!
Yeah.
Let's hear it for just fucking showing up.
Just fucking showing up.
Just showing up to the shit show that is.
Yep. Exploring it a little bit, laughing at it a little bit more, and then saying goodbye and making a second cup of coffee and getting back into bed because it's, probably 47 degrees in this house right now.
I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. We still have hot water. I take 2 hot showers a day. That keeps my body temperature up for like half an hour after. And if I wrap myself in lots of layers, I can hold it in for longer. No, it's fine.
This is really proof that I take my emotional cues from other people, because the fact that you're laughing and smiling, right? You're very smiley today. I don't know if the cold has frozen your lips in place.
I'm a little delirious, yeah.
But you're smiling and laughing, so I feel like it's okay. But when I take a step back, I'm like, holy shit, this fucking sucks, man. I'm so upset for you.
Yeah. You texted me, you're like, well, then your landlord should put you up in a hotel until the heater's fixed. And I was like, well, yes, that's exactly what they should do. Unfortunately, for landlords, we're not human beings. We are their passive income stream. And as long as we're not calling the police or actually dying, they don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm really good at telling people that I'm not in contact with what to do. Deciding what people I don't know should do. Yeah. Under ideal circumstances that's my milieu, man.
We're so good at that, but yes, you are spectacularly good at that.
Just let me fix this.
Okay, here's what needs to happen. Yeah. Well, I will say on the flip side of that, but here's the thing. So this is how much I've internalized the social mores of capitalism that say that the boss should never be inconvenienced, even a little bit. And it's okay for me to be pretty desperately inconvenienced for a long period of time. Which is that we were late with the rent in September. We were a week late because my student aid hadn't come and whatever. I didn't plan appropriately. I didn't plan appropriately is a reasonable way of saying that. But it was only a week late. We lived here 4 years, and that was the first time it was even late a single day, right?
Right.
And so, like, the fact that I've inconvenienced the boss is somehow like an emotional trigger for me. And I'm willing to just freeze to death to make up for it. You know?
Yeah.
Fuck you, capitalism.
Yeah, it's interesting the way in which the fact that you've ever made a mistake becomes your own internal justification for kowtowing to power.
Uh-huh.
If
I was perfect, I wouldn't do this. But I'm not perfect. Therefore, like, is perfection the fucking bar? Oh my God.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. Jesus.
Well, I do have a pop culture recommendation for everyone. On Netflix, there's a new film by Aaron Sorkin called The Trial of the Chicago 7. It is fucking fantastic.
Are there lots of walks and talks in it?
Actually, not too many.
Oh, that's too
And there's
bad.
no female characters, so it's incredibly well written.
Women aren't a part of revolution, Claire. Revolutions are entirely men.
There's one female character, but Sacha Baron Cohen plays Abby Hoffman.
Nice. Of course he does.
So good.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
good.
That's great.
And I will say that's a piece of history that I didn't know much about, and it was fantastic and also very funny. So it wasn't ponderous, you know, even though it dealt with some pretty serious aspects of history. The delightful Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays the prosecuting attorney.
Yeah. My favorite I haven't seen it yet. You recommended it to me. You texted me about it, in fact, which tells me how much you are enthusiastic, because we don't normally, like, out of the blue in the middle of the week tell one another about media. We usually save that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, it must be really good. And I had seen it, but I haven't gotten around to watching it because I myself started watching another thing I want to recommend.
Oh, nice.
Which
Good segue.
Yes, which is
Classic
also on Netflix.
Professional.
Thanks.
Sorry.
No.
Well, you know what was real professional was me interrupting you 5 times while you were trying to get through that
it's
sentence.
perfect. Leave it all in. So also on Netflix is it's like a limited, it has a season number, but it's like a limited season. They don't call them miniseries anymore. I don't know. I don't understand this whole new format thing. But it's 7 or 8 episodes. It's called The Queen's Gambit, and it's based on a book that was written about chess in the early 1980s, and it's about a genius girl who learns how to play chess when she's 9 and basically takes over the world. And it's really great, not only because, unlike Chicago 7 apparently, it passes the Bechdel test. There are more than 2 named female characters who talk to each other about something other than a man. It's a pretty... So, yay! It's such a low bar, and so many pieces of media fail to meet it.
Yep, it's true.
But it's great, too. It's a good watch.
Fantastic. I'll check it out.
Yeah. I liked it a lot. There, it has some weaknesses, but it's great. I'm excited for the Chicago 7. That's next.
If you want another good spooky film, but also fun, Vampires versus the Bronx on Netflix.
Okay.
Fantastic. It's a little bit like Stranger Things, but it's set in the Bronx with a group of kids who discover that their neighborhood is being gentrified by white vampires.
Yes. Oh, so it's
so much
completely 100% historically accurate then. Yeah. Great. Awesome.
My favorite was the shot of the new butter store coming.
Oh, God. Yep. Yep. I mean, in the thought experiment of where to take this, like, boutique store bullshit, that's a great place to take it. This is the butter store.
Coming soon, the butter store.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so much fun. It's super light, but it does have that really cool through line and message to it. But it's just a really good time. I highly recommend it. That the young actors are fantastic.
Cool.
And fun. Yeah.
Cool. I'll check that out. I mean, I'm not doing anything but watching TV and huddling in bed, so perfect time for recommendations. My friend who has the ducks that I was talking about a couple weeks ago, I was supposed to go and help her out yesterday morning, and and it hadn't snowed then, but it was very cold, and I was like, I'm sorry, I can't make it. Our heat's off, and I'm pinned under all of these blankets trying to survive. I'm sorry. You're going to have to handle the ducks on your own this week. Yeah.
Snuggled up to a warm bowl of cabbage.
Yeah, exactly. Little snorkel coming out of the blankets. Glasses fully fogged in a superhuman environment. Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, Lord.
Well, we are here this week to tell some spooky stories.
Yes. That's why we're
Showing
here.
off my vocal range there.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm really here.
I'm here to show... Well, we're here to show off. That's right. That's the tagline for It Chooses You. It chooses you. We're here to show off.
How about we're here to show off?
Oh, yeah. No. I mean, the punctuation of that statement varies for sure. I mean, some days it definitely is a question mark. And then some days it's very fancy and it's attended grad school and it's, we're here to show off, : I bet you didn't see that coming. Or, a structural investigation of humor.
Structural. I love how the colon is the sign of grad school.
It is. Yeah.
It is the punctuation of grad school.
It
You're
is. Right. It's a grad school dissertation artifact, the colon.
That's true.
Title with 17 different parts. Because you're unfocused and you can't narrow it down because you don't really understand what you're talking about. If you really understood what you're talking about, your title would be a single word. What are you writing about? Art. No. That's not true. I feel like my laugh is particularly spiky or something today. Sorry. I'll try and get that shit together.
Particularly delightful, maybe.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice. Can I start because I need to tell you about my journey with our topic this week? Okay.
Please do.
Okay. So I mentioned last week, maybe it made it in, maybe it didn't, I can't remember, but there is a folklorist who taught at Fairmont State College in West Virginia for many years. Her name was Ruth Ann Musick, Musick. Ruth Ann Musick. And she wasn't a trained historian, and she wasn't a trained, folklorist. I actually have no idea what she actually taught. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sure I could look it up. But she made it her mission to basically collect West Virginia folktales and anthologize them. Isn't it amazing?
That I wish more people would do that, and I wish I were one of them, but I don't think I'm committed enough to any one thing to be able to do that. Yeah,
there are parts of the whole folklore framework that I really like and enjoy, and then I read them and I'm like, well, that's not a fucking story. It has no beginning and no end. It has no meaning. There's no it's just a collection of things one of your students' uncles, grandfathers told you happened one day, Yeah.
Where's fucking Sorkin when you need him?
That's right. There's no walk and talk in here. Yeah. So she collected a bunch of them and she published a volume of them in 1965. And I think the first one was called The Telltale Lilac Bush. I think that's the first one she published. I'm going to double check the publication date. Yeah, 1965. She published a book called The Telltale Lilac Bush and Other West Virginia Ghost Tales. And thankfully, I had a very excellent kindergarten teacher named Luanna Maddox, who is an angel. And she, I think, introduced us to, this was Halloween in grade school, which was really wonderful. And I didn't appreciate it at the time because I preferred Hollywood Dracula movies. And I still, if I'm honest, prefer Hollywood Dracula movies, but I now recognize some of the value of what's in here. And so she categorized them these are stories about dead animals coming back, and these are stories about fratricides, and these, into these folkloric categories that a lot of stories fall into. So they're organized like that. And as I was researching, I kind of went online a little bit and I Googled West Virginia ghost stories. And it's really either her or it's people running haunted riverboats in the Ohio River who are charging $30 a ticket and paying their volunteers 10 cents a ticket. So if I have to choose between the horrible excesses of capitalism and the exploitation of the workers of West Virginia and Ruth Ann Musick, I choose Ruth Ann Music.
Excellent.
So
does she have, just for people to know, does she have one book or
she has
several books?
So she died a long time ago. I think she died in 1977. So 65 was the first one, and then in, I think, 76, right before she died, another anthology was published by the University of Kentucky Press, and that's called Coffin Hollow. Coffin Hollow and Other Ghost Tales.
Nice.
And these, I don't think these are the only two, but these are the two from my youth, and so they're the two that I found and brought into the conversation. There may have been others, but I mean, she when she died, she left all of her research and all of these collected stories to the Fairmont University Library, so that other people could pull stories out and publish from them. And it was really interesting because she collected them from her students. She basically said, "Hey, does your family have any creepy stories that they tell or whatever?"
Right.
And her students would just write them up and bring them to her. You know, this happened a long time ago in Rose Run outside of Morgantown. My great-grandfather said that blah, 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 you know? So.
And this is what happens when people are connected to a place.
Yeah.
Because you don't get this shit in the suburbs.
No.
You get urban legends, but
Yeah.
you don't get folklore.
Yeah, and that's a super interesting point, and I hadn't considered it, and now I want to talk about it. So we don't get it in the suburbs because it doesn't have anything to do with the place or the history, because, I mean, in a lot of ways, suburbia erases history rather than creates it, you know? But I think also in suburbia, it's like, I mean, so what are some suburban, like the hitchhiker hand on the car door?
Yeah.
That's one.
Yeah.
You know?
The babysitter, the calls coming from inside the house.
From inside the house. Yeah, totally.
The waking up in the bath of ice and your
right.
organs
and there's
missing.
a note saying don't stand up. Yeah.
Call 911.
Yeah. Someone who knows more about these, like who understands genre fiction, I think better than I do. You might be that person. No, she's shaking her head. So no, not Claire either. Someone who
I
knows.
shrugged. So I was open to the possibility, but
I'm willing to maybe take on the idea that I know more about that.
perhaps.
Maybe. Yeah. But yes, these are all definitely connected to place. And as I was reading through them again, I was remembering some of the things that didn't sit right with me when I was a kid, which is like in West Virginia, if it's a story about a ghost soldier, you have to be real clear whether it's a Yankee or a Confederate soldier, because West Virginia saw a lot of both. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or it's like how many stories are about the unquiet spirits of enslaved people taking over, who are left on these buried and murdered on plantations and whatever. And I'm like, well, that's appropriate. That's good for you, ghost. And they're talking about like it's a terrible, scary thing. And I'm like, no, that's accurate. That's good.
Give them hell.
You deserve to be scared to death, motherfucker.
That ghost is part of the revolution.
That's right.
Not the American one, the current one.
The current one, yeah. Yeah, and there are a lot of stories about people being very brutal to dogs and other people. I mean, it's really, it's really brutal. So, I'm not reading any of those because why traumatize others? I can just contain that trauma myself and we'll be good. But yeah, so I have a few.
Step it down to the bottom of the bowl of cabbage.
That's right. Just tamp it down to the bottom of the kraut and never look at it again till spring. Okay, so I'm going to read, but I'm not going to read in that reading voice because I don't have a spooky voice. And they're really short. This is the other thing, is these folktales are literally a page long, most of them. Because it's like, my grandpa said once in this place, there's a light that you can see on it, it's like that.
Yeah,
So I've chosen the best ones.
All right, hit me with some spooky tales.
Okay, this one is from Coffin Hollow. It's called Midnight Whippoorwill. During Prohibition, many stills and moonshiners were to be found in West Virginia. One particular still was located in Smith Hollow. The owner was Charlie Smut. I'm going to do a little aside here about West Virginia names, because they're amazing. If you liked Lord of the Rings and you wondered why all the hobbits had such amazing names, it's because J.R.R. Tolkien actually was a guest lecturer at the University of Kentucky for at least a year. And Appalachian names are fucking crazy. Like, they're not spelled the way you think they are, but I literally went to school with a family whose last name is Rotten Crotch, okay? So,
wow.
They're fucking crazy names. So Charlie Smut is who we're dealing with now. Okay. He was a very eccentric man. Charlie was a bachelor and had only one good friend, Jim Hayward. The two lived together in an old weather-beaten shack at the head of Smith Hollow. So
Okay.
let's just take a second out. Okay, so there are two gay men living in a shack, but no, they're both bachelors. They're just best friends.
Right.
Okay, cool, West Virginia, cool. Okay, Jim was the only person who knew about Charlie's still. Charlie would only go to the still at midnight, while Jim stood watch. They had an understanding that if Jim saw someone coming, he would whistle like a whippoorwill. On several occasions, they used this signal to avoid detection. Every night after Charlie had finished working the still, he and Jim would sit down by the oak tree, where Jim stood watch, and drink their daily portion of moonshine from tin cups that were camouflaged and hidden each night in a big hole in the oak tree. Okay. Jim thought that Charlie always got the biggest portion and was bitter about this. But he never said anything because he thought Charlie wouldn't let him have any more liquor if he complained.
He didn't want to cut off the source.
Yeah. Bite the hand, etc.
Bite the hand that drunks you. I don't know.
That's perfect. Bite the hand that drunks you is perfect. Jim was becoming very old and feeble. Not feeble. Feeble's not a word. Let me try again.
But it should be.
Jim was becoming very old and feeble. On a snowy and windy Friday night, he died. Now Charlie was all alone, but he never failed to make his midnight excursions to the still, because when you're an alcoholic, you have to keep drinking alcohol. It's not in the story. That's my commentary. Okay. That's my commentary. 1 week after Jim had died, something very unusual happened during Charlie's trip. He heard a familiar sound, the whippoorwill. Immediately, he blew out the light in the lantern and hid. After a few minutes, he called, "Jim, Jim, is that you?" In return, Charlie heard the sound of the whippoorwill and the clatter of tin cups. Then all was silent. Every Friday night, the same thing occurred. On the first anniversary of Jim's death, Charlie made his usual trip to the still, but this time something else happened. After hearing the usual clatter of tin cups and the whippoorwill, Charlie glanced over to the oak tree. To his amazement, there stood Jim with a tin cup in his hand. "I finally got my share of the moonshine," Jim said, and then he disappeared with the tin cup in his hand. Charlie was terrified and ran back to his cabin. And after that time, he never again heard the whippoorwill or the clatter of tin cups, and he never saw Jim again.
Oh.
Yeah.
See, knowing that they were gay, it feels more like a love story.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And those little things we hide from each other when we love someone. I don't think I ever get as much moonshine as you, but it's not worth fighting over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
No.
There's a sweetness to that story.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of them are very. Some of them are very. That's right. I'm so articulate.
And
Okay.
of course, it's West Virginia. It involves a moonshine operation.
Yes, of course. Okay. This is called A Face in the Window. Nice. During Civil War days, Charles Perry, a soldier in the Union Army, was often sent out to get supplies for the hospitals. Butter, eggs, milk, chickens, etc. And so had many interesting experiences. One morning when he had started out to gather supplies, he came to a farmhouse situated near a small creek. He rode up to the place, hitched his horse to the post, and knocked on the door. After a few minutes, he decided no one was home, but as he was going down the steps, he saw someone peering out the second-floor window. Charles went back up to the porch and pushed open the door, gun in hand. There by the chimney stood a middle-aged lady, as white as a ghost. He asked her why she hadn't answered the door, and she replied that she was afraid he would kill her since he was a Union soldier. Remembering the face at the window upstairs, he asked if anyone else was in the house. She swore to him that they were alone, but he asked if he could look around. Although she said she would rather he left, he started upstairs. Slowly he climbed the steps, expecting a Confederate soldier to jump out of a doorway and shoot him at any moment. He ventured first into one room and then another. Finding no one, he had almost decided that he had imagined the face at the window. But then suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he saw the figure of a young woman slide into an opening in the wall. The girl had long brown hair and a beautiful complexion. She wore a pink silk dress that fell in folds around her legs. As he turned toward her, the opening in the wall closed and upon inspection could not be found. Thinking it could be a passage to an inner room of the house, he closely examined the wood, but there was not even a crack in the wall. Bewildered, he went to find the woman he had spoken with, but when he returned to the first floor of the house, she was nowhere in sight. Searching the house carefully, he could find no trace of her anywhere. Knowing she couldn't have gone far, he looked around the farm, but could find no clue as to her disappearance. He rode to the nearest farmhouse, and a lady came out on the porch to greet him. He asked who lived in the farmhouse to the south, and she replied that the place had been deserted since an intoxicated Union soldier had come upon the house, where the mother and daughter lived alone. The soldier had taken both their lives when they would not give him food and money. Shocked, he asked the housewife to describe the mother and daughter, and her descriptions fit the woman he had seen exactly. And her descriptions fit the women he had seen exactly. Charles rode back to the house in hopes of seeing the beautiful girl again. A strange feeling seemed to attract him to the place. Upon entering, he saw for the first time that the rooms were filled with dust and cobwebs, as no one had been in the house for months. All he could see were his own footprints leading up the stairs.
Whoa.
Yeah.
There's always that, in a good ghost story, there's always that little button at the end, you know? A really specific detail that gives you the chills.
Yes. The call is coming from inside the house.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. The other category of West Virginia ghost tales are mining ghost tales.
Sure.
And that's kind of specific to West Virginia. So there are quite a few of like ghosts in mines, things like that. And this is one of those. John Boyer and Ted Clara had grown up next door to each other. Two closer friends couldn't be found. They walked to school together every morning and home together every afternoon. When someone picked on one, he was sure to hear from the other. They were also hired together in the coal mines the same day and worked side by side. 3 years later, Ted got married. John felt that their lifelong togetherness would be broken now that Ted was married, but it wasn't so. Nearly every night of the week, he would be over at Ted's place playing cards with the couple. The whole town was shocked when Ted and John had a falling out, evidently over Ted's wife. Ted accused John of seeing her when he wasn't around. Even though they weren't speaking to each other, they still worked side by side in the mines. I'm going to take an aside here. That's the other thing about small towns. That's the thing. Is if you have a huge fight with someone, you're going to see them the next day. There is no ability to have a fight and then take space and sort things out. No,
Right.
no. You had a friendship-ending fight, and tomorrow you will work literally touching shoulders in a hole in the ground. Yeah. Okay, so even though they weren't speaking to each other, they still worked side by side in the mines. One cold February evening, while working together as usual, their silence was broken by bitter words. John told Ted he wasn't going to work with a jealous fool. When he started to walk out of the mines, he heard a loud rumble and turned just in time to see the roof falling on Ted. As he hurried back to help, a piece of slate fell on him, pinning his chest to the ground, but Ted rushed over and was able to lift it off. John still couldn't move because his ribs were crushed. He remained there in agony until some other miners came to rescue him. When he told them what had happened, all the miners turned to one another in amazement. They knew Ted was lying dead under 30 tons of rock and couldn't have possibly pulled the slate off John.
Whoa.
Yeah, there are a lot of those.
Wow.
I have some others that are online, but those are just 3.
Those are lovely.
Yeah.
How great. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear yours. What was your journey with it? How did you?
Yeah.
What was your journey with it? Jesus fucking Christ. That's the gentrification of language right there.
I had ghost stories on my mind, didn't have a specific one lined up that I thought I should do. And I was watching the remake of Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix, which is fantastic. I highly recommend. And they just came out with season 2. And there was an episode that really stuck with me. And so I decided to do my own research and do this story. It's the Ghosts of Tohuko.
Okay. How do we spell that?
Tohoku.
Tohoku. Okay.
The Unsolved Mysteries episode is called Tsunami Ghosts.
Okay.
So my sources for this was the website Newser. There's a Cosmopolitan article by Lauren Puckett. There's an article by Marco Margaridoff on allthat'sinteresting.com. And there was an episode in response to... there was an article in response to the Unsolved Mysteries episode on Screen Rant. So,
Okay.
as well. But everybody check out the second season of Unsolved Mysteries, or the first. It's great. So on March 11th, 2011, at 2:46 p.m., a magnitude 9.1 earthquake hit Japan, shaking the ground for 6 minutes and causing a tsunami that was 131 feet at its height. So that's the height of about a 12-story building, just for reference. The tsunami kills over 15,000 people. 217 square miles were flooded. 120,000 buildings were destroyed. And millions were left without power and water. Soon after, it began snowing. So this tsunami hit the Tohoku region in the northeast of Japan particularly hard. And there's a town in Tohoku called Ishinomaki, which is a population of about 150,000, almost 150,000. And in Ishinomaki, over 3,000 people were killed and 2,770 people were reported missing.
Yeah, I've seen those. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please, please.
I went through a disaster thing, and there are so many, because people have cell phones, there are so many videos.
I was actually thinking about you.
I mean, because it starts like, oh, it's just a tiny little ripple of water coming up the river. And then suddenly you see ships being washed in. So there was a dash cam video in a truck of a little car in front of them, and they could see the water coming, but there's no water on the road yet. And the person in the car was like, my car is going to get washed away. I have to get out of here, right? Japan is no stranger to tsunami. And so they got out of the car, and they were gone for a few seconds out of frame. And then they came back and shut the door of the car. Yeah. And that was the sweetest thing I'd ever seen. Like, if my car is going to be destroyed, it will be destroyed, like, intact. Like, I'm going to do everything I can, including closing the hull up, right, to keep it. It was just a very lovely thing. Like, I'm going to save my life, but I'm also going to save my car. Anyway.
Right.
Anyway, so many videos of that. Okay, cool. I'm very excited.
Yeah, in Ishinomaki, 50,000 buildings were destroyed. God. And one thing they do really well in the Unsolved Mysteries episode is do that. They show footage that really gives you an idea of the complete and total devastation of this event. One man they interviewed lost 54 coworkers in the tsunami. God. So I'm just trying to imagine losing 54 people I knew. And it's incomprehensible to me, that level of complete and total annihilation. So the other issue is that traditionally the dead would have been cremated according to custom. But because of the tsunami, the crematoriums weren't working. And so the dead were buried instead. And about 3 months after the tsunami, the reports of ghost encounters started pouring in.
That's a large number of unquiet spirits.
Yep. In Tagagajo, which is a town in that region, the fire station began getting calls from areas that had been completely demolished. So absolutely impossible. The firefighters eventually visited the site where the calls were coming from and prayed for the dead, and the calls stopped. There's one man who's haunted by the ghosts of those who he knew who died in the tsunami because he sees their eyes in puddles when it rains. And he says now he hates the rain. Another woman lost her 3-year-old son during the tsunami, and she began to experience panic attacks and depression, understandably. And the son had a toy train that was in the living room, and it began to frequently turn on and make its little choo-choo noise. And she took that as a sign that he was watching her and with her. There was multiple reports of a particular woman visiting her friends and sitting down to tea. And every time she left, a seawater stain remained at the cushion where she sat. Another story tells of a woman preparing food in the evening when there was a knock at her door, and a woman drenched in water stood in the doorway and asked for dry clothes. It was a clear night. The woman came back out and gave her dry clothes and went back inside, and then there was another knock at her door, and she looked out to see several more drenched people standing there. One of the most interesting aspects and well-documented aspects of this is the stories of the cab drivers in that region. So 7 of them have actually come forward publicly with their stories of giving ghosts rides in their taxis. One man said that in the summer following the tsunami, he was hailed by a woman in a particularly devastated area. So he was kind of surprised to see anyone there. And he was taken aback as the woman was completely drenched and wearing a winter coat in the heat of summer. She asked to be taken to another area that had been similarly hit hard by the tsunami. And the driver asked if she was sure, telling her the area was almost empty. And then the woman asked the driver, "Have I died?" The driver turned to answer the woman, but found she had completely vanished.
Oh, God.
Another cabbie picked up a fare, which was a young man, who, when asked what his destination was, would just point forward. And he finally asked the cab driver to take him to this park in the mountains. But once the cab got there, the driver turned around and the passenger was gone. And so there are multiple accounts of ghost passengers like this. And one of the most beautiful things is that the cab drivers have begun to pay for the fares out of their own pockets.
Yeah.
Which they see that it's their duty to honor those that have passed in the tsunami. On the day of the tsunami, a man named Endo went to a shelter to try and locate his mother. I think the family had been looking for her. And he asked for her at the front desk, and he was told to wait. And as he was waiting, he saw an old woman near a window who was wearing his mother's clothes. So he went closer and realized that it was his mother. He decided to take a photo of her so that her family would have proof that she was okay. And at the moment he took the photo, the woman's face changed into a complete stranger. It was not his mother. Later, he discovered that the bus his mother was riding in was washed away by the tsunami at about the same time he took the photo. Now, there's a man named Reverend Kaneta from the Sudai Temple in Ishinomaki, and he's a Buddhist priest. He goes by Reverend. And he explains that in Japan, the dead and the living aren't separate as they are in the West. The veil is very thin between them. And that they can see each other, and the dead watch the living. I don't know what this means.
Read it anyway. We'll speculate.
They can see each other. The dead watch the living can experience the dead. I don't know. He says, quote, "Many of us have lost loved ones without saying goodbye. We don't think it's fair. The deceased feel the same way." There's a woman named Kansho Aziwa who is a resident of Ishinomaki, and she believes the dead don't always know they're dead. She says they want to go home, but they can't find their way because the city's changed so much because of the tsunami and the reconstruction that's happened afterwards. And so they can't find their families. And Aziwa has been able to see the dead since she was a child. And she tells the story of encountering a group of drenched young men wearing winter coats in the summer on the side of the road. And she says she pulled over because she felt sorry for them. She says, quote, "I asked what happened. One said he wanted to go home, but that he was lost. I had to tell them the truth because I didn't want them to suffer anymore." End quote. So she told the young men that they had died. And one thing that really strikes me about these stories is that growing up, for me, the perception was that if there were ghosts or spirits of the dead, that they were somehow all-knowing. I mean, there are stories of lost spirits and things like that, but the sense here is just that the dead are connected to us. They're just like us. They can be lost or confused, you know. Then the possessions started. So Reverend Kaneta that I mentioned has been single-handedly helping his community with exorcisms. So one example is there was a man who visited the tsunami site after months. He hadn't gone there. And the next day he began crawling around on all fours, rolling around in the mud, licking furniture, and screaming at his family, "Drop dead. Everyone else is dead, so die." Kaneta exorcised him, telling him that some spirits who didn't know they were dead had possibly possessed him. He said, quote, "They've been trying to express their regret and their resentment through you." And Kaneta explains that it doesn't matter if possessions are real or not. The suffering the person is experiencing is real.
Yeah.
So we need to help them.
Yeah.
And the Unsolved Mysteries episode features the story of a woman they called Ami. It's not her real name. She's experienced multiple possessions, and she went to Reverend Kaneta for help. And he helped her on occasion after occasion after occasion. And one spirit that possessed Ami was a little girl that had to let go of her brother's hand as she ran from the tsunami. Her brother cried out that he couldn't run anymore, but she ignored him because they had to keep running from the water that was coming. Ami said she could feel the cold, she could feel the ground beneath her feet, she could feel the fear and the touch of her brother's hand and the moment that she let go. The little girl saw her brother swept away by the water, and she kept crying out for her mother during this session with Kaneta. The little girl wanted to apologize to her mother for letting go of her brother's hand. Yuko Kaneta, who is the Reverend's wife, stood in place of the little girl's mother, holding her hand and ushering her to the light. So Kaneta says that there's a range of what people can sense, see, and hear. And he says everyone is on that spectrum somewhere, but that after a disaster, that range tends to expand as we focus on what we're feeling rather than what we're thinking. And there have been a lot of people pointing to the idea of collective grief and post-traumatic stress disorder as an explanation for these sightings and its experiences in the region of Tohoku. But Kaneta dismisses those claims as irrelevant. He says the important thing is to listen to people's stories as a means of guiding them through their grief. Which reminds me a little bit of what we were talking about last week, about this idea of being a shepherd to someone through whatever it is they're feeling, and not necessarily trying to give them answers, but just to listen and sort of be there for that.
It's also the practice of energetic medicine. Like the thought when you treat someone isn't questioning whether or not the things they're experiencing are real. They are real. It doesn't matter why they're having those symptoms, but those symptoms are causing them pain or grief or other kinds of issues, and it is our responsibility to relieve them of those symptoms.
Yep. And Kaneta says, this is a quote, he says, "Scientists complain about our ghost stories. They tend to focus on evidence and logic. Some psychologists would say it's because of people's trauma, but that's their interpretation based on what they've observed from outside this chaos. That kind of interpretation doesn't mean anything to us or to the survivors. Why can't we embrace them as they are and help them find their own answers? Why can't we help them in this process?" And he also says that in his mind, these ghosts are not to be feared. They appear because this is a quote, "They appear because they love you and long for you. If you see ghosts again, tell them, you are dead. There's a world for you to go to. We will remain and make sure we revive our relationship to this city. Do not worry about us." End quote.
Yeah, that's lovely.
And that is the story of the Ghosts of Tohuko.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that idea that, I mean, and it's true, right? In certain cultures, the boundary between being dead and being alive, I mean, it's not, there's a foot in both worlds. Like, both are present, you know? I love that idea, even though it is not our culture, necessarily. Yeah, there's also something like the idea that a ghost would just want to get a cab home is somehow here it's like there's a vengeful spirit, or if something has happened to them that they have to put right, or they've done something evil and so they can't move on. There's always some kind of like linear reason for the fact that they're around.
Some kind of inherent judgment.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. Whereas some ghosts just don't know they're dead and they're just trying to catch a cab to get home. Like, I love that. I also love that idea that the cab drivers are like, oh yeah, no, we've picked up ghosts and that's happened. And we just started paying the fares ourselves as a way to honor the dead. Like, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I like that very much.
Anyway, I highly recommend the episode. It's very affecting.
I'll probably watch it as soon as we get off.
It's very emotional and beautiful. And this Reverend Canetta is an incredible man. He said that at the beginning, right after the tsunami happened, he's like, look, I've been doing this my whole life and I did not know what to say to people at all. And over time, he's come to these conclusions, like it's important to listen. And he's actually, it seems he's done an incredible amount of work to help his community grieve. He opened this place called Café du Monk.
That's awesome.
Where
you get beignet? Do you get beignet there?
Exactly.
Awesome.
Where, people can come and just share stories and talk. And he's just a really lovely man. He's doing good work.
I'm excited to watch that very soon.
Yeah.
I also, I wanted to say in this episode, even though this saint is not a saint of my culture, I'm trying to figure out how to love something without appropriating it, which is a challenging line to walk for whiteys.
Yeah.
But San Simon, Mashimon, is a Mexican folk saint, Guatemala in particular, Mexican and sorry. See, leave it in. That's fucking whiteness. I said Mexican, I meant Guatemalan. Sorry. Guatemalan. And he's a saint who drinks and smokes and womanizes and is fully in support of you doing all of those things. Like, he's not like Jesus. He's not hoping that you'll one day be better. He's like, no, you're good just as you are. And you and I can have a relationship where I protect you and you worship me, and we're all good. That's my understanding of it so far. So his saint day is the 29th of October. And as I say that, I realize I definitely do need to check that. Hold on. Pretty sure 29th of October. 28th. See? Fuck. I can't decide if it's better to leave all of my bullshit whiteness in this episode or edit it out for my own pride.
No, you should leave it in, and I'll add my own bit.
Okay.
Which is that what I almost just did was compare him to a white saint that I know about. So there you have
it. Anyway, my understanding.
Self-busted.
Yeah, right.
We gotta name it. We gotta see it.
Yeah. Whew, God, it's embarrassing, but there it is all the time. Anyway, I very much like him. He seems like a cool guy.
He sounds wonderful.
Yeah. And so his favorite offerings are tequila and tobacco. And I'm very, if you are of that culture and it feels like a good and right thing for you to do, I recommend thinking about him, maybe developing a relationship with him. I'm pretty sure my whiteness kind of precludes me having a real relationship with him, but maybe not. Maybe bullshit whiteness is another thing he's willing to accept. So we'll see.
I sent my mother a fancy grocery delivery from a natural food store in her area. And, there was a gin and tonic marinated smoked salmon. Probiotic cream cheese and bagels and baguettes and lovely salads. And she was thrilled.
Yeah.
She was thrilled. And it's funny because I forget that her love language is gifts because she's not very good at giving them.
Yeah. My love language is praise, and I'm terrible at offering it.
Right. So anyway, that was a fun bright spot in my week, and I might try and do that every couple months or something.
That's so great.
It was fun. It brought her joy. It brought me joy. It was good all around.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. She said she actually texted me a picture later that same night that her neighbors had put a witch on her door. She has this little thing with the neighbors where they leave things in front of their door. And so she was like, this is just a night of surprises. I opened my door and look, there was this witch.
That's a great relationship to have with your neighbors.
Yeah.
in other news, I bought a new dog bed. Because I never bought one for Wyatt when I adopted him, because he and Murphy just kind of laid on each other on the one I had. Right. But Murphy's getting older. I took him to the doggy chiropractor last week because he kind of tripped as we were walking and his leg was a little warm, and I wanted to get him checked out. And so she gave him an adjustment, which was hilarious to watch. And he didn't like the exam very much, but then when she went to adjust him, he just like kind of relaxed and started drooling. So it was very interesting.
Oh, buddy.
And he got acupuncture at that point too. And I've been doing this thing all week. So I got him his own bed so that he could have space to like be old and warm and cozy. And of course the little one, and it's a huge bed. It's big enough for the both of them. I bought it up a size so that they could share it. But no, Wyatt gets in it and lays like completely spread-eagled in it. Yeah. And so Murphy now thinks it's actually Wyatt's bed. I'm like, no, the whole point is that you're old. And he's like, first of all, fuck you. No, I'm not. Second of all, clearly that's Wyatt's bed because he never gets out of it. So we're having some dog bed drama this week.
Well, weirdly, in other dog bed news, I tried to buy one this week, but it turns out they can be like $130, which on the way I said to Tim, this seems like one of those things that's going to be kind of stupid expensive.
Yes.
I need to go online or something. I went to one store. And it's a local store because I wanted to support them. It's where we buy her food and everything. And they just had a limited selection. Yeah. And like to get the kind, I want one that has like walls to it. You know, that she can
donut style, exactly.
Yeah, because she really enjoys that. And I made her one, but it's just like a cushion. Yeah. And so I was trying to get her like a cozy one for the winter, and those were the one appropriate size for her were like $130, and I was like. So I made the woman get up on the ladder, you know, the step stool, and pull down like 3 or 4 different ones, and then didn't buy one.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you have a brick and mortar store.
Yeah.
You don't let people look at stuff. Yes, no, I spent too much on this one for sure. Yeah. But I looked, and there's like, well, and also like I wanted to buy it from an American company because honestly, like I believe manufacturers in other countries, mainly China, probably would be perfectly willing to put radioactive material in dog beds because it's just a dog, right? So I felt a little bit of I don't know. I guess what I'm feeling is like post-consumer righteousness. That yes, I overpaid for something, but is it overpaying really? Yes, it is. But is it really overpaying to make sure that yes, it is still overpaying. But is it really overpaying? It's like that.
It's the briniest righteousness there is.
Yes.
Post-consumer righteousness.
Oh.
Well, happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween. Oh my God, my hair is so staticky. What the fuck? Happy Halloween. Happy All Saints Day. The veil between the living and the dead is thinning as we speak. We'll reach peak thinness on the 31st. We need to be careful. Be aware. And if you have angered any spirits, think now about what you might offer them in terms of repair for your damaged relationships so that they do not enter your house and do strange things to anything you own or anyone you love.
I feel like that was really ominous.
What do you mean? Yeah, I wish I had a bass voice where that laugh was meaningful coming from me. Yours was very nice. Not that you have a bass voice, but you know what I mean.
I can't, you know. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Teresa, thank you.
Claire, thank you.
And we will see you all next week.
Yay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Testing. Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyoupodcast@gmail.com.